All right, this is a project I'm working on. I'm working on welding this skid steer quick attach plate onto the bucket. This bucket's off of my New Holland 1997 4835, and the only thing I had to do was plasma cut this top brace off of here. You can see where I plasma cut that off. There used to be a piece that kind of wrapped around the loader attachment. The rest of these pieces I'm going to try and leave on. We'll see how this goes. I've got it tack welded. Not too good, but it's tack welded. I used a stick welder, arc welder for that, and I'm not a fan of arc welding. I bought this cheap Yeswelder arc welder, and I was going to use that to weld this plate on there, but soon learned that I'm not a good arc welder, so I can use a MIG torch though. So I've got this Vulcan 140 MIG Max. It's a 110 volt welder, and with 35 thousandths wire, you can get 140 amps out of that. It's an inverter type welder, and so is the new one, this Yeswelder MIG 205DS is also inverter welder. This is supposed to make 205 amps. It's 220 or 110. Looks like it comes with 220 cord attached, and it comes with an adapter if you want to adapt it down to 110. And I imagine it automatically senses if it's connected to 220 or 110. So I was going to do a little comparison. This is let's look at the torch. It's the Vulcan torch. Looks like this unthreads the shield for the MIG welding gas. Unthreads, unscrews, and with the Vulcan, this just pulls off, which I can't do with one hand, but it pulls straight off of there. So that's the torch differences. They both got a little reinforcement spring on them. This one's got a hanger for the Vulcan. This one's kind of rubberized grip. The red part is rubberized. The black part is hard plastic. But it feels pretty good. Feels about the same. The cord thickness is about the same. Now it comes, this one, the Yeswelder comes with a graphite insert for if you're doing, if you're welding aluminum wire, if you're using aluminum wire, I think you have to use this graphite insert, so you can change that out inside the torch. And what else it comes with? I'm going to do some more comparisons in a minute, but it also comes with some extra tips. It's got I looked at them, and there's a 30 thousandths, there's two 35 thousandths, and there's one 45 thousandths wire tip in there. So you got all the tips you would need except for the small one. I think it does smaller wire. Yeah, it does. It says right on there 23 thousandths, 30, 35, and 45 thousandths. Comes with a pretty good looking ground clamp and a stinger torch for doing stick welding or arc welding. And also comes with all the drive wheels for your spill or wire spill that you would need. Some of these for solid wire. This one's for your flux core wire. It's got two sizes, 0.09, 0.9, and 0.8. And this is a bigger one, 1.2 millimeter wire and 0.9 millimeter wire. This one is 6.6. That must be the 23 thousandths, and 0.8. So it's all metric. Yet on the front here it has it in both metric and standard imperial measures. And they give you a chart, setup chart here for all the different processes. For every process, basically, you got this setup chart, and this is a multi-process welder, so you can do TIG, arc welding, and MIG welding, flux core welding. So that's that. Shows you everything on there. And it's a sticker, so you can stick this on the side. I'd say you probably stick it on maybe the inside of this door here. That's probably where the chart's going to go. So do a few more comparisons here. Let's look at the ground wires difference, ground clamps. It's the Vulcan ground clamp versus the Yeswelder. Vulcan ground clamp looks a little better. You know, it's got bigger hardware. It's probably got real copper, where this might be. I'd have to stick a magnet to it. But look at the thickness of the copper versus the thickness of the copper here. I don't know if that's real copper. It does have a braided copper to join the two sides, and the hardware is not copper. I'm not sure if this is aluminum. The wire inside here, inside this cable, might be aluminum. Here, it looks like it's the Vulcan, looks like pure copper. So there's your difference in your ground clamps. I'm not sure how long that clamp is, but it's pretty dang long. It reaches, let's see, I'll step it off here. Just an estimate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'd say that ground clamp, which is permanently connected to the welder here, you could, I'm sure, internally take it out. It's probably about 10 feet long. And here's the Yeswelder ground clamp. Let's connect it to the same spot there. See if it's the same length. I'd say it's approximately the same length. It's probably 10 feet also. See from over there all the way over here. I like that it has that, I think this is called a DIN type, where you can just plug it in, then you can easily switch your polarity. Here's your thing for switching polarity if you wanted to, or if you're flux core welding or standard MIG welding. This is nice. They give you the graphite for TIG, that liner, and I like the way you can switch, you know, from 110 to 220. The reason I got this 220 welder, because I don't think I know for sure the Vulcan is not going to be able to weld this plate steel onto the loader bucket. I think this is 5/16 inch thick here. So I got to weld that 5/16 plate to the bucket, which is probably about 3/16 of an inch. It rained since I ground these off, so it's got a little rust on it, which this bucket's real rusty. When I ground this down, you can see there's pitting and the, you know, rust pitting and everything in it, so it's going to be a dirty weld either way. We're going to go ahead and weld through it. I'm going to go ahead and try it. Max this out on settings. I got 35 thousandths wire in it, and I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to try the Vulcan. Just weld a little section here. There is a little gap, but I'm going to try and weld that and see if it melts that 5/16 plate. How much? We probably won't get much penetration on that. And then I'm going to go ahead with the Yeswelder. I'm going to go with the synergistic settings instead of manual mode, MIG. And I'm going to go ahead and give it, I'm going to use 220 on this now. So that'll be the difference. This is be maxed out 140 amps. This one I can get dialed up because it's 220 to over 200 amps. There should be a difference in the way it welds, but I'm going to go with the synergistic because I'm not familiar with the settings on this at all. And I'm going to use the same 35 thousandths wire. I'm going to take the wire out of here and put it in here. That way, with the synergistic, it should give me, you know, it should set the voltage and everything. I don't know if it sets the wire speed, or you just turn your wire up with this, and then it automatically gives you more amps and more voltage. I guess that's the way it works as you turn up the dial. And here's another difference between these two. This has this style torch connection. I'm not sure what you call that. Oh, there's supposed to be an O-ring right here on that. That's gas, or that's probably the wire. The wire probably comes out there. This is probably the gas one there. That has, yeah, that has an O-ring on it, and this is probably these two here is probably the control. So that's a little comparison of the two. They both can hold a big spool of wire, like a 10, I think they're 10 pound. Let's look at this one here. I don't do a lot of welding, so I just buy the smaller spools. I just buy the 2 pound spools. Wire. Here's what the Vulcan looks like. Feed mechanism for the wire. It's got this. You can kind of gauge your tension. There's for your flux core. Here's the duty cycle at 100 amps, 40%. I think this, I'm not sure what the duty cycle is, 30% on this. I think they said in there. I looked briefly through the manual. I think this is 30%, but I'm sure it's rated a different amount of amps because that's a higher amp welder, depending if you're in 110 or 220. But here's what the feed mechanism looks like. It does have a gauge on it for tension, but you know, it doesn't look quite as good as the Vulcan as you'd expect. You know, the Vulcan's more money, so it's got a little better looking feed mechanism on it. Yes, may. They both have a manual feed button to feed. If you're starting a spool, there's a button in here called wire feed. And make your spool gun switch. That's another thing, you can use a spool gun on here. Here's the outlet for the spool gun. And I believe this can use a spool gun too. I'm not sure how though. Exactly how it works. I never weld aluminum, so I don't have a use for it really. But there's a cold wire feed. If that's it there. No, that's your switch for spool gun also. So definitely can do a spool gun. Cold wire feed is right here. On that, so they both have that. They both have the same type of gas hookup. And you just connect a hose to it. That's not a barbed fitting. See that thread's in there on the Vulcan. Same on the Yeswelder. You just thread your gas hose in. And I got enough gas in here. Should have enough to weld this. Some other differences, you know, the size is a big one. The Vulcan is a beast. It's a beast. It's, oh, I don't know how many inches that is. It's pretty big. Here, I got a tape measure here. Just give you an idea. So that's about, looks about 20 inches, where the Yeswelder is about 17. And width-wise too, you can tell, you know, the Vulcan's bigger, heavier, much heavier. So it's pretty light. I'm gonna say the Vulcan welder is gonna last longer. Now I'm only bought this one just to weld tractor parts, which I don't do that often. And this is the welder I'm going to use for thinner material, but I will try this on the thinner material with 110 also. If I weld some sheet metal or something, do some car repairs. But that's kind of the difference. I like the DIN style connections. This is nice for polarity and everything. I like doing that. Don't know what else. I'm not sure if this has like a wire burn back or I think it does have like a hot start function. So to get the arc going, it gives you a few more amps to start with, and then it drops down, you know, 20 amps or 30 amps or whatever it does. And I know this does have the hot start function on it too, where it gives you a little more boost to get that arc going. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and do some welding here. I'm going to leave that little bit of flash rust down there. It's not bad. Go ahead and I'm just going to try to do a little tackle, not a tack, but I'm going to do a little strip of welding like that with each one, and then we can kind of compare them. Alright, so here's the gauge on the Yeswelder. It's in metric, 300 volts, 105 degrees centigrade, and 3.31 millimeter, whatever that is. Oh, it's a 12 gauge wire in there. So it's kind of short. So what I'm doing, my welder plug is over here, quite a ways away. So I've got a 10 gauge extension cord. So this should not drop voltage. Somewhere on here it says 10 gauge. 300 volt. 60C. 10 gauge. There it is. So that should be plenty. I think that cord's, it's probably 25 feet long, I'd say. I'm pretty sure. There's a cord I just ordered off of Amazon as extension cord, or I was using my plasma cutter with it. Alright, so the Vulcan, I was looking at the gauge on the Vulcan. It's 14 gauge right there. 600 volts, 90C, 14 gauge. Even though that's really thick, I guess the rubber covering is really thick on this one. So this has got 14 gauge, which should be plenty for 110, 20 amp. And this has got a 12 gauge for 220. And then I've got my 10 gauge to my outlet over there. Alright, the first one up is going to be the Vulcan, since I already got this connect it up. I'll make sure my gas is on. I got set just to go over 20. These are some welding settings I used on 3/16. I was welding the bushing on the loader. So we're gonna go with those for now. We got about 9 on that. The voltage here and wire speed on E. We're gonna see what happens. That's all 35 thousandths wire. So I'm gonna go ahead and set up right here. Set the camera here for a second. And go ahead and try. See if we'll weld that. Let's have some rust on it. Just purge the gas. Alright, here we go. Well, it definitely tied into the plate, but I don't think I'm tied in the bucket very well with this. Yeah, I think I'd have to do 2 passes on this instead of trying to weld it all in one pass. I'm going to go ahead and try a little more up here. I'm going to do a 2 pass on it. I'll do a root pass and then come back and cap it. Try that. I'm going to give it a little more wire too. Sputtered a little bit for me. So I gave it a little more, like 1 more on the volts. And 1 more setting on the volts and 1 more setting on the wire speed. We'll see how it works. Let's get it positioned. Yeah, that should be good. Zoom in a little bit. Alright, so I'm going to do a root pass. Try to tie it in better. That's not too much. I'm going to cut back on the wire. Just the wire speed back a little bit and see what happens now. I'm not sure how much penetration is getting on it, but there's what the initial weld looks like. Go ahead and try and cap that off. Yeah, it's probably way too thick a metal to try to get with a 110 welder, but I'll leave that like that, I think. And I'll do a root pass with the 220 here, and then try the same thing with the, try to weld the whole bit. It definitely started when I was trying to do the in one pass. I laid on this plate steel, it definitely penetrated through. You can see it melting good, but I don't think it tied in the bucket very good, which I probably could have laid in to the bucket a little more. Just technique. Could have melted this good and then kind of slowly go down to the root there, come back up and not try to weld so far out into the bucket. I think better to make two passes though with this metal being that thick. Definitely tied in, but I don't think it tied in very well. Right there, just a little bit. There's just a little bit of melt going on that root pass. Alright, so here's my settings. When I went up to, I did boost the voltage up, about maxed that out. It was almost maxed out. And when I went to G, more wire, it just couldn't handle it, started sputtering. I had to dial it back to E. So that's what I was setting on to do that root pass here. For that one right there. And this one here, I had to heat, or the voltage turned down a little bit to, I think I was on 8 for the voltage, or between 8 and 9. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing I did with the 110 welder. I'm going to do like a root pass, and then I tried the full pass all in one. I'm going to do with the 220 welder, the Yeswelder. I'm going to do a little root pass here, and then a little bit of full pass. Let's see what happens. Let me adjust this a little bit. Root pass first. I think we definitely got tie-in on that. It seems a little, I'm not sure, sputtering a little bit. I don't like the welder settings that much. I think I may just go with it though, because I'm not familiar with this welder. It does seem to be putting a bead down. So there's our root pass. It's a real flat bead compared to this is, really lumpy. And I think it's just penetrating better, a whole lot better. I'm going to try a full pass without doing a root pass on it. And I'll leave the same settings, I guess. I may try some different settings later. Kind of felt like I wasn't tying into the bucket real strong, but it looks like it did. There's definitely getting good melt on the welder attachment. Like I need to change my technique a little bit. It did tie into the bucket, but I think I'm tied in better on the plate steel than down here. I think I'm going to cut back the settings a little bit. Okay, so here's the settings I'm I'm feeling pretty comfortable with these. 23 on manual mode, 23.5 volts and 11 for the speed at 35 thousandths. And I did turn my gas up because the wind was blowing. I was getting all this porosity here. So here's my root pass with those settings. This is from arc welder. I was going to use arc welding. I think I figured this out finally. This bucket is much harder steel than this plate steel. I was thinking I needed to really lay into that plate because it's 5/16 and the bucket's only like 3/16. But it's just the opposite. I gotta heat up the bucket, put a lot of heat into it, and then just dab into that plate steel because that plate steel melts so easy. That's the secret here.